Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, there's a whole lot that we need to cover today. When I say a whole lot, I mean a whole lot. So what I'm going to try to do is to jump right into it. And I think I'm going to start by saying this. This is TV Courtroom, hosted by yours truly, attorney Michael Cord, aka Michael X, aka the angriest black man in America. And as I pointed out, there's a lot to discuss. So this is a 1 hour show, basically about 55-minute show. So I'm going to devote approximately 16 minutes or so to three important topics. And I request that each of you pull out your pen, pull out your pad, or I guess just pull out your cell phone and take notes because class is in session. Three topics that we'll discuss today include: one, the Republicans and the NRA are guilty in the mass murders in Kensington and in Kingsessing and throughout the United States. That's the first of three topics. Once again, the Republicans and the NRA are guilty of mass murders in Kingsessing and throughout the United States. You might say, well, I thought it was that guy, Kim Brady character. Nope. I'm going to tell you why the Republicans and the NRA are truly the guilty parties. That's topic number one. Topic number two is DA Larry Krasner's powerful criminal injustice report. Now think about that. You have a district attorney who is talking about injustice. That's important. It's so important that we want to make sure that we cover the entire topic. Many of you probably heard about the press conference that took place back on Juneteenth. And those of you who didn't, I'm going to go through all of it. And it pertained to the district attorney's criminal injustice report. You might expect the Defender Association, arguably the greatest criminal defense law firm in Philadelphia, maybe even in Pennsylvania. You'd expect the Defender Association to do something like that, or maybe the NAACP or the ACLU, great organizations. But it's interesting because it was the district attorney who addressed the issue of injustice in the so-called criminal justice system. We'll talk more about that as topic number two. Topic number three is timely and kind of untimely. It's timely because it deals with something that happens every year, so it's going to come up again. Untimely because this show is aired on the first Friday of each month, that being today, Friday, July 7th. So 3 days ago was July 4. I want to talk about July 4 this year. I want to talk about July 4 next year and every year after that, because I wrote a powerful article entitled 10 Reasons Why Blacks Should Never Celebrate July 4. And as I said at the outset, get your pens out, get your pads out, get your cell phones out, record this, take notes, whatever, because this is important stuff. You know that there are right wingers, there are fascists out there who want to make sure that you don't know the history of America. And I don't blame them, because if I were white and racist, I wouldn't want anybody going to my closet and seeing all my skeletons, because there are a lot of skeletons in America's closets. So white racist power brokers in the United States want to restrict you from learning what you should learn about American history. Well, today we're going to discuss that. Topic number one, once again, Republicans and the NRA are guilty of mass murder in Kingsessing and throughout the United States. That's topic number one, so let's jump right into it. I write a weekly column. Actually, I write two columns in the Tribune, Philadelphia Tribune. One is every Sunday. It's called Freedom's Journal. And then there's another one I do once a month called Black Dollars Matter. Well, in the Sunday edition, this coming Sunday, is an article entitled Republicans and the NRA are guilty of mass murder in Kingsessing and throughout the United States. So I'm just going to talk about it briefly, but I want you to read it. Now, remember, I said it's in the Sunday Tribune. It's available online late Friday evening. So sometime, let's say around 8, 9 p.m., go to phillytrib.com. phillytrib.com. When you get to that website, type in CORD, COARD, and the article will come up. And thanks to our producer extraordinaire, Roland, who put that up on the screen. And once you get to that website, type in CORD, type in Republicans, type in NRA, type in Kingsessing, it will come up. And here's how the article starts. The real AR-15 killer of 5 random innocent human beings in Kingsessing on July 4th wasn't 40-year-old Kim Brady Carricker. Instead, the real killer was the 152-year-old NRA, National Rifle Association, along with a bunch of old Republican white men and a few other persons in Congress who are bought and paid for by the NRA. Now, that's a provocative start, but I back it up with facts. I point out that the NRA, the National Rifle Association, was founded way back in 1871. It means as of 2023, it is 152 years old. Well, they began to do their political thing, the NRA did, in 1934, because Congress began to do the right thing when it came to guns. In 1934, Congress passed something called the National Firearms Act, but the NRA wasn't having it because they're into guns. And, you know, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm not a psychiatrist, but psychologists and psychiatrists have a whole lot to say about men who feel the need to have a bunch of guns, a bunch of big guns. I'm going to stop right there. Just do the research. Google psychosis and guns and men, and it'll come up. But I want to get beyond that. I want to talk about the political part, not the psychosexual part. There's a lot there. There's a whole lot there. And when you see all these men carrying these big guns and firing them at gun ranges and at innocent deer, you have to ask yourself, well, what's wrong with them? Well, I think Freud will tell you what's wrong with them, and any psychiatrist will tell you what's wrong with them. But that's another issue for another show. So here we got the NRA, a 152-year-old organization founded way back in 1871. They began their political activism about 60 years after they were founded, because in 1934, Congress began doing the right thing. They said, hey, we see, you know, people, there's gangsters in Chicago and all over the place, a lot of folks, a lot of guns doing bad things. So maybe we should pass a law. The same way we have laws that regulate people driving, laws that regulate who can vote, laws that regulate who can serve the military, laws that regulate who can be on juries. It just makes sense who can buy alcohol. It just makes sense that, hey, to the extent that there's laws regulating those things, which could cause problems, maybe we should create some laws to regulate guns. Because unlike those other things that cause problems, I mean, hammers cause problems, cars can cause problems, alcohol can cause problems, all those things can. But the difference between those things and guns is those things weren't designed to kill. Guns were designed, guns were manufactured, guns were produced, and guns are bought to kill. That's it. So if you're going to regulate the other stuff, driving and voting and drinking and that kind of thing, shouldn't you regulate guns? And that's exactly what Congress did in 1934 with the National Firearms Act. And I got to keep track of time because it's 3:39 now. I want to make sure that I get through all of this by about 3:50 so we can get to the other two topics. But so we got the NRA founded 1871. We got Congress doing the right thing, beginning to do the right thing in 1934. And that's when NRA said, hold it. We now need to create a lobbying arm to fight the National Firearms Act. and it began to oppose that. Fast forward another 30 years to 1968, when Congress passed something called the Gun Control Act of 1968. Once again, the NRA opposed it. Fast forward to 1975, when the NRA began to focus on its priority, which was to fight against any laws that restricted the rights of white men. And that's what it was all about, to kill stuff, to kill Black people, to kill red people, to kill brown people, to kill Bambi's mother. It's white men going around killing stuff. So in 1975, the National Rifle Association, NRA, formed what they called the Institute for Legislative Action. This was the political arm of the NRA. And the NRA then began to put big pro-gun money where its big pro-gun mouth was. And it created specifically a PAC, a Political Action Committee. And here we are today, where the NRA, as of 2022, 2023, spends at least $250 million each year, not just in 2023, not just in 2022, but $250 million, not a million with an M, but $250 million with a B dollars each year in local, state, and especially federal elections. That's why that big money, along with approximately 5 million members, makes the NRA one of the most politically powerful lobbyist groups in American history. So if they do this, they're responsible for what we see almost every day in America. That's why when I wrote this article in the Tribune, I then and still now blame the NRA and Congress for what happens with every mass murder, including what happened in Kingsessing on July 4th at the hands of Kim Brady Carricker. You might say, come on, Mike, that's kind of stretching it. How do you justify that? Let me read to you what I wrote. Therefore, I blame the NRA and Congress because the only reason Carricker was able to slaughter those victims so quickly is that the NRA and Congress together put the AR-15 in his hands in the very same way they put an AR-15 style weapon in the hands of mass murderers who did their thing. And if you check it, you'll find out that what I'm saying, that in the following mass murders I'm about to explain to you, those mass murderers used the same AR-15 assault weapon that Kim Brady Carricker used on July 4th in Kingsessing. Do the research. You'll find out that the same weapon was used by the guy who mowed down 60 human beings in Las Vegas, Nevada in 2017. 49 human beings in Orlando, Florida in 2016. 27 human beings in Newtown, Connecticut in 2012. 26 human beings in Sutherland Springs, Texas, back in 2017. 21 human beings in Uvalde, Texas, just a few years ago, 1 year ago in 2022. 17 human beings in Parkland, Florida in 2018. 14 human beings in San Bernardino, California, 3 years earlier in 2015. And 10 human beings in Buffalo, New York in 2022. And many of these human beings were babies, literally babies, mowed down by an AR-15 style weapon, the very same type of weapon that Kim Brady Carricker used on those innocent human beings in Kingsessing here in Philadelphia on July 4, 2023. And I'm just talking about the ones who were mowed down relatively recently by that same AR-15. But don't forget about the thousands, and I do mean thousands, in fact, tens of thousands of others who have been killed or severely wounded by AR-15 style and similar high-powered magazine self-loading firearms. By the way, let me pause right here for a second, because when I'm talking about guns, I'm not talking about that 6-shot revolver that you used to see in Westerns years ago. I'm talking about military assault weapons. I'm talking about weapons that are self-loading, that you have that magazine and you put that magazine inside the gun and you fire off the shots. And each time you fire a shot, the next bullet goes up, and that goes up into the chamber and the hammer hits it and it goes out. You don't have to reload, putting 6 separate bullets into that revolver like you did back in the 1800s and early 1900s. These weapons today are literally military assault weapons. They are literally weapons of mass destruction. In fact, there's a great organization, you should check it out, called Everytown for Gun Safety. Just Google everytownforgunsafety.com. And you'll see that, as they pointed out, quote, and by the way, I said com, it's actually everytownforgunsafety.org. That's everytownforgunsafety.org. Check it out. It's a tremendous resource that provides you with all the information you need to understand exactly what I'm talking about. And here's what that great organization said, quote, in the 8 years between 2015 and 2022 alone, over 19,000 people were shot and killed or shot and wounded in the United States in a mass shooting with AR style or similar high-powered magazine / self-loading firearms. You might say, well, Mike, what are you talking about when you say the AR-15 or the AR-15 style rifle? Well, I know a little bit about guns, not a whole lot, but I know the basics. And the basic definition of an AR-15 style rifle is any lightweight, semi-automatic magazine. And by the way, magazine is that thing, that little casing where you put the bullets inside that casing. And then where the handle of the firearm is, you stick that in there and then you pull the trigger. So all those bullets, anywhere from 10 to 20 to possibly more, are already in there. So if I want to slaughter some babies in an elementary school and find out, hey, there are 20 kids in this one classroom, let's put that magazine in there and go and do my damage. I don't have to go in there and say, hey, let me shoot 6 of them and then reload by one at a time, putting one bullet in the revolver. Those semi-automatic weapons are literally weapons of mass destruction. And don't tell me, God damn it, that you need it for hunting. Who needs an AR-15 to slaughter some deer minding their business in the forest? The only reason you need a weapon like this is if you're a soldier in the heat of battle. That's the only time you need it. Otherwise, you don't need it. Who needs it inside a city? Who needs it in Philadelphia? Who needs it in Kingsessing? Well, Republicans in the state legislature, Republicans in Congress, because they are prostitutes of that pimp we call the NRA, they make these weapons available. And I know for a fact that Kim Brady Carricker had some mental illness. Even apart from what his family said or what some neighbors said, when somebody commits a crime like this, by definition, there is something wrong with you. If you did it because somebody stole your girlfriend, well, there's a motive, but there's still something wrong with you. But if you did it to complete strangers for no reason at all, there's clearly something wrong with you. And in America, in fact, no place on the planet should somebody with a mental illness in connection with their potential for violence be permitted to have access to an AR-15 the way that Kim Brady Carricker and others. Those cases I mentioned to you in Las Vegas, in Orlando, in Southern Springs, in Uvalde, in San Bernardino, in Buffalo, and Parkland. Those people got those weapons of mass destruction, many of them, if not all of them, legally. Why? Because Republicans make it legal for them, because the NRA tells Republicans to make it legal. So let me go back to the definition of it. Here, we talk about the AR-15 style rifle. We're talking about any lightweight, semi-automatic, magazine, self-loading firearm that's based on or similar to what was known as the Colt AR-15 design. So you had the Colt Firearm Company creating a weapon that does what the AR-15s today use, but it came from that initial design. And the New York Times back in 2018 wrote the following, quote, "The AR-15 style rifle allowed the Parkland, Florida mass murderer to fire in much the same way that American soldiers and Marines would fire their M16 and M4 rifles in combat." Who does that? Like, why would anybody in a city have access to the type of firepower that American soldiers and Marines have when they fire their M16s and M4 rifles in combat? Why would you have that? The answer is the Republicans and the NRA, they want you to have it. You know what's interesting about the NRA? They just had a recent major national convention. You know what the first rule was for the attendees? That you can't bring a gun to the convention. I almost cursed. WTF. The NRA says those weapons are good enough to come to poor Black neighborhoods, but when the NRA has national conventions, they don't allow those guns to be brought in. Interesting. They just supported a move in Florida to allow people to carry concealed weapons with no permit. Think about that. So any guy who just broke up with his girlfriend and is upset can go buy a gun, put it in his waistband, and then go to his ex-girlfriend's house and ask her why she left him. What do you think is going to happen from that? And when he goes to her house, he can even get on the bus with the guns in his waistband, because in Florida, you don't need a permit for that. No background checks. Just get a gun and walk around like the Wild West. Let me continue this because I got about 3 or 4 minutes before I get to the next topic. I just mentioned New York Times and that quote that they made about these weapons are similar to what's used in warfare. But Time Magazine this year, just about a month and a half, 2 months ago, wrote that the AR-15, and this is important, check out this history. The AR-15 was originally marketed by Armalite, that's a gun manufacturer, Armalite, to the military. So the AR-15 was initially designed for and marketed to the military, but it apparently wasn't reliable enough because it was unsuccessful. As a result, you had Armalite with all these AR-15s, they began to flip the script. So they designed it for the military. When for whatever reason, the military wasn't feeling it like that, the company then rebranded it by selling the patent to the manufacturing company Colt in 1963. We always hear about Colt 45. Colt doesn't just make 45s, they make a lot of stuff. So Armalite sold this militarily designed weapon, or the patent for it, to Colt in 1963. And then Colt rebranded it and began to market that weapon to civilians as a hunting and sport rifle. Think about that. So clearly, it was never designed to be a hunting rifle. It was never designed to be a sporting rifle. It was always designed to be a weapon of war, but for whatever reason, the military wasn't feeling it. So Armalite sold the patent to Colt, and Colt then rebranded it to make it seem like, hey, this was always for hunting, and this was always for sporting. It was not. And as of this year, 2023, Time Magazine pointed out, quote, recent estimates show that there are some 20 million not 20, not 20,000, not 2 million, but 20 million of these AR-15 style rifles across the United States. Whoa, 20 million. And guess what? Kim Brady Carricker had one of them in Kensington on July 4th. That's why I know the NRA itself refers to and describes the AR-15 as, quote, the most popular rifle in America. Think about that. And you're proud of that, NRA? Of course they are. And this too is shocking, as everything I've shared with you is shocking, but check this out. Many of those mass murdering killers, almost all of them, needed, including Kim Brady Carricker and Kingsessing, needed no training whatsoever. As Steve Lindley of the Brady United Against Gun Violence organization informed Time magazine, and check this out, quote, this is a gun expert telling, quote, the AR-15 has such a strong capacity that gunmen don't really need to aim. They just need to shoot at the crowd of people, unquote. That's precisely what Kim Brady Carricker in Kingsessing on July 4, 2023 did. And think about that. Not only was it in Kingsessing, it could have been anywhere. And on July 4, you're traveling to go see your grandmother. You're traveling to go see your godson. You're traveling to go to the supermarket, and you just happen to cross paths with somebody who got access to a gun that the Republicans and NRA made available. Think about that. Clearly, Kim Brady Carricker had a mental illness, and neither he nor anybody else who's not a soldier in the heat of battle should have access to a weapon that was designed for military battle. The thing about this weapon is that extremely violent people and extremely violent people with mental health issues, they prefer this weapon. And the numbers prove it. In fact, at least 10 of the last 17 deadliest mass shootings in America, at least 10 of the last 17 deadliest mass shootings in America were done by AR-15s. Think about that for a second. And somebody sold that gun to Kim Brady Carricker to go into Kingsessing. Now, from what his family said, from the neighbors said, there seems something weird about him, something off about him. No disrespect to the mentally ill, that's a problem that they can't control. But why would the law allow a guy who appears weird to come in and buy an AR-15 legally or have access to it? It's something wrong with that. And I got to give credit to Philadelphia City Council. They tried to do the right thing in 2020. And before that, in 2007, they actually passed local laws to restrict the use and the possession of certain firearms by certain people. This is 2020 and 2007. But each time the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania slapped them on the hand and said, no, you can't do that. There's something in the Pennsylvania law called preemption authority. And preemption authority is a legal concept, a state law, not just a legal concept, but a state law that says, quote, local governments are restricted from having any power to regulate the ownership, transfer, or possession of firearms. So each time City Council tried to do something to save us from these weapons of mass destruction, the Democratic controlled City Council, the Republican controlled state legislature said no, because they didn't give a damn about Philly. They're from Susquehanna County. They're from Lackawanna County. They're from Bucks County, Berks County. They don't care about what goes on here in Philadelphia. So big shout out to City Council for trying to do the right thing. And finally, let me just say this. 2 quick points I want to make before I get to my last 2 topics. People will see and hear me on this TV courtroom show and say, that lawyer, Michael Court, doesn't know what he's talking about, because the reality is that, quote, guns don't kill people, people kill people. That's what they would say. And I'm thinking, you stupid MF. I'm not going to say the words now, but maybe I'm calling him a mother, father. I don't know. But to say something like that shows how stupid you are. That's as stupid as saying bombs don't kill people, people kill people. Well, people use bombs to kill people. People use guns to kill people. Of course, cars wind up killing people. Alcohol winds up killing people. Hammers wind up killing people. Lawn darts wind up killing people. But the difference of what I pointed out early on, lawn darts, cars, alcohol, were not designed to kill people. Guns were. Guns are. Bombs were. Bombs are. So in the same way that we regulate who can drive and under what circumstances, who can drink and under what circumstances, who can vote and under what circumstances, none of those things can kill anybody, but we regulate those things. But when it comes to guns, we say, for example, not we, white folks, Republicans in Florida and in Congress, say, give everybody a gun, just do your thing. But when the NRA has its own national convention, you can't bring guns there. What does that tell you? And let me just touch on, by wrapping up the whole mental health thing, because there's a scholarly magazine called the Stanford Daily. And the Stanford Daily made a great point about guns and mental illness. Here's what they said in 2018, quote, having a mental illness doesn't automatically make one inclined to harm others. That's true. Although having a mental illness doesn't automatically make one inclined to harm others, why has the government, backed by the NRA, rolled back healthcare for mentally ill people, while at the same time making it easier for mentally ill people to obtain guns? So Congress, backed by the NRA, says we're not going to provide the funding for healthcare for the mentally ill. What we are going to do is to make it easier for the mentally ill to get access to guns, like Republicans did with Kim Brady Carricker in Kingsessing on July 4, 2023, like the NRA did with Kim Brady Carricker in Kingsessing on July 4, 2023. Something has to be done. And that something is more rational, reasonable, intelligent people must vote. You must vote on the city level, on the state level, and especially on the federal level, and kick out all those, any politician you see with a lapel with an AR-15 on it, that person ought to be, I don't even like the concept of sending people to prison. But in the cases where you foment mass murder, maybe your dumbass ought to go to prison. So here's the new law. Anybody with a lapel on their lapel with an AR-15, there are many white, male, and other congresspersons today that walk around with a lapel on, with a AR-15 on their lapel. Think about that. That weapon, which is the weapon of choice for mass murderers, many congressmen put that symbol, that image of an AR-15 on their suit lapel and walk around like it's a wonderful thing. They ought to go to prison after they get kicked out of office. Vote, vote, vote. Time now is 4:04. We got to make sure we squeeze in all the other topics in the second topic, and I'll go through this relatively quickly because I'm going to give you the source so you can get all the information yourself. The second topic is DA Larry Krasner's powerful criminal injustice report. And I wrote an article about that. You can also find that in the Philadelphia Tribune. Just go to phillytrib.com, type in CORD, C-O-A-R-D, type in Krasner, K-R-A-S-N-E-R, criminal injustice report. And the article starts like this. On Juneteenth, DA Larry Krasner held a press conference at the site of the old Eastern State Penitentiary to announce his offices, and this is the name of the report, quote, Racial Injustice Report, Disparities in Philadelphia's criminal courts from 2015 to 2022. Now check this out. Larry Krasner, a white guy, and I call Larry Krasner the blackest white guy I know. In fact, I said when I spoke at that press conference, I referred to Larry Krasner as John Brown with a law degree. I'm embarrassed to say that I wish that there were Black elected officials who fought as hard for Black issues the way this white DA fights for Black issues. And I know not only does Larry Krasner do his thing to help the oppressed as an elected DA, I knew him before he even thought about running. When there were protesters, primarily Black, protesting nonviolently against injustice in the city, there were only a few lawyers who would always come through to represent these activists pro bono. I'm proud to say I'm one of them. And for about, I don't know, maybe 10 years before he ran for office, it was also Larry Krasner. When Michael Brown was murdered by the cop in Florida, I held a major protest and rally at the Criminal Justice Center. I asked all lawyers to come into the lobby of the Criminal Justice Center and lay down dead like Michael Brown was shot down dead. I asked them to hold their hands up and say, don't shoot. And it must have been, and I got to give credit because more of the lawyers showed up, Black ones, brown ones, white ones, yellow ones. I guess I'd say anywhere from 30 to 40 lawyers showed up. And I let the sheriff's department know before we did it what we were going to do. And we needed an attorney to represent the group of lawyers, an attorney to negotiate with the sheriff's department to make sure that either nobody got beaten down or nobody got arrested. And which lawyer stepped forward to represent the other lawyers who were involved in my protest at the Criminal Justice Center? You guessed it, Larry Krasner. So he's always been doing the right thing. That's why I sing his praises as an elected official. But I got to tell you, I wish he was Black, because I want to be able to praise a progressive / revolutionary elected official the way I praise him, not because of anything personal, because of what he does. Having said that, on Juneteenth, he held this press conference. He selected Juneteenth because he respects and understands the importance of that date for the liberation of Black people. And he selected that site. That's the old Eastern State Penitentiary. And we all know on Fairmount Avenue, because that prison, that penitentiary opened in 1829, closed in 1971, and was once the most famous and most expensive prison in the world. So that's why Larry Krasner chose that date and that site. And he began to talk about his criminal injustice report. And he realizes that the laws are not created and are not enforced equitably. Many of these laws stem from the slave codes, and then the Black codes, and then Jim Crow. And even more recently, in 1971, we all know about Richard Nixon, Tricky Dick. Well, in 1971, Republican President Richard Nixon implemented his so-called war on drugs. And he said he was doing it because drugs was the scourge of the American society. It was bringing us down. That was in 1971. And sadly, many Black people jumped on that bandwagon and said, yeah, those drugs are horrible. Lock everybody up. That's 1971 when Nixon implemented that. Fast forward 23 years later to 1994, when Richard Nixon's former domestic policy chief, a guy by the name of John Ehrlichman, admitted that, man, it was never about drugs. Richard Nixon's domestic policy chief, John Ehrlichman, 23 years later in 1994, publicly admitted that it was designed to criminalize and incarcerate Black people and progressives, hippies, revolutionaries, primarily Black people. That was 1971. Larry Krasner understands that. He also understands the history of America and slavery beginning in the Virginia colony in 1619, fast forwarding to 1684 when slavery came to Pennsylvania. He also knows that the police departments, the municipal police departments as they are known today, were created from slave patrols in 1704 in the colony of Carolina. So the first quote unquote police department was in 1704 in the colony of Carolina. And there's a history professor, a woman by the name of Sally Haddon. She teaches at Western Michigan University. Here's what she said, quote, first of all, she wrote a book entitled Slave Patrols, Law and Violence in Virginia and the Carolinas. Here's what she said, that the laws creating those patrols deputized civilian white men to engage in, quote, the monitoring of rigid pass requirements for Blacks, breaking up large gatherings of Blacks, searching slave quarters randomly, and inflicting impromptu punishments. Think about that for a second. This is 1704. This is the colony of Carolina. And the very same thing that white men were deputized to do then, damn it, they're deputized to do today as police officers. Check this out. They were designed as a result of creating laws that deputize civilian white men to engage in the monitoring of rigid pass requirements. Today, you see Black guys walking down the street wearing hoodies, being harassed by cops, committing no crimes, just being Black and walking down the street with a hoodie, or in some cases, a suit and tie, but they're Black and they got to show their ID. That was in 1704 in the colony of Carolina. Same thing happened when they were designed to break up large gatherings of Blacks. Those Blacks who were enslaved not doing anything, but just together. And those slave patrols had to break that up. Same thing happens today. I went to Cheney University as an undergrad, and then I went to law school at Ohio State. When the Black kids at Cheney would get together and have their little parties and do whatever we did, you had the state police coming on campus and breaking up that gathering. When I went to Ohio State University, 60,000 students, I saw white kids going down High Street. High Street is the main street in Columbus, Ohio, like Broad Street in Philadelphia, flipping cars over. White boys flipping cars over, coming out of the bars on High Street in Columbus, Ohio, Ohio State University. Not one cop ever showed up. So in that case, there was no breaking up of large gatherings. And then finally, searching slave quarters randomly, sounds like stop and frisk to me, and also inflicting impromptu punishments, beating people down. That's 1704 in the colony of Carolina. Well, maybe that's 2023 in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I'm not really sure. But Larry Krasner, he understands that the laws today are a result of that type of history. He also understands the 13th Amendment. People think the 13th Amendment in 1865 ended slavery. It did not. Read it. It doesn't say slavery and involuntary servitude are hereby abolished, period. It doesn't say slavery and involuntary servitude are hereby abolished, exclamation point. It says slavery and involuntary servitude are hereby abolished, comma, except following the conviction of a crime. So what would happen is it went from the slave codes to the Black codes. Now the Black folks are supposedly free after 1865. White racists needed new laws to keep them in a slave-like condition. So they came with Black codes. And the Black codes were laws like curfew laws and vagrancy laws and loitering laws, and just created BS laws to criminalize Black people. You might say, well, how could that be? Didn't we get our freedom in the 13th Amendment? Who wrote that? Well, the answer isn't who wrote it. It wasn't just the North that wrote the 13th Amendment. It included, we're talking about people who drafted and passed the 13th Amendment. It included the former Confederate vice president, the same guy who took up arms and led the rebellion against the United States, helped draft the 13th Amendment. It wasn't just him. It was also 4 former Confederate generals, along with 5 former Confederate colonels, along with 6 former Confederate cabinet officers, along with 58 former Confederate Congress members. So the same devils that enslaved us were the same devils who quote unquote freed us. Larry Krasner understood all that. In fact, he understood what Michelle Alexander, the author of the seminal book entitled The New Jim Crow, what she meant when she said, quote, more African-American men are in prison or jail on probation or parole than were enslaved in 1850 before the Civil War begins. You might think I misspoke, so I'm going to repeat that and repeat it slowly. This is Michelle Alexander, law school professor, prominent author, wrote a book in 2011 called The New Jim Crow. Here's what she said, quote, more African-American men are in prison or jail on probation or parole than were enslaved in 1850 before the Civil War began. Think about that. That's why in Larry Krasner's criminal justice report, he started the report, by the way, it's a 66-page document, but he started it with a 2-page letter near the front of the report. And here's what Larry Krasner said, quote, this report asks us to face the impact centuries of systemic racism and economic inequality in Philadelphia have had on our criminal justice system. It puts numbers to a problem. It is a starting point for all people of goodwill to think together and work together to defeat racism in criminal justice. That's not Malcolm X talking. That's Larry Krasner talking, because he understands that the goal is not to be a racist persecutor, but to be a just prosecutor. That's why he did what he did. Let me just go on, because there's another point I want to make in regard to the report that Larry Krasner made. He started this 66-page report with that quote I just mentioned, part of a 2-page letter, and he ends that letter by writing the following, quote, we've wrote this report because we can't fix what we don't measure. The reform movement requires all of us to look critically at trends that disproportionately impact individuals across racial, ethnic, and cultural groups, with a commitment to ensuring justice through an evidence-based policy implementation and evaluation. Advancing racial justice is among the most important goals of the movement to reform the criminal legal system. Minimal progress has been made on this front, and it will take a massive collaborative effort in society and among criminal justice actors to end the racist outcomes in the criminal justice system. Putting numbers to the problem are a first step. That's important. That's critically important. He's not saying, hey, I have all the answers, I know all this. He said, no, let's talk about this. Here's the research. And by the way, the research was the result of nearly 300,000 cases that have been put together and evaluated. Nearly 300,000. And as a result of this, he came away with 7 takeaways, or the report came away. And I got to say the report because Larry Krasner is so humble. He always says that it's not me who should get the credit. It's the movement that should get the credit. It's not about the moment. It's about the movement. And this criminal justice report with Larry Krasner at the helm is the step in the right direction of that movement. Now, to near the end, this report has 7 key takeaways. Let me just refer to 3 of them. 1, racial disparities observed in Philadelphia's criminal court system are rooted in severe historical injustices and wealth inequality, biased against Black people, biased against poor people. For over a century, Black Philadelphians have been overrepresented in arrest and criminal charges. Disparities have not been resolved, and in many cases have been worsened by federal, state, and local laws and policies. That's takeaway number 1 of 7. Here's the second takeaway. Quote, in regard to certain records and charges, Black and Latinx individuals who are convicted of aggravated assault or burglary are more likely to be sentenced to incarceration than white individuals convicted of the same crime. And I really want to get through all 7, but let me just go through one final one, the third one. Quote, while this district attorney's administration's policies have helped to reduce disparities in supervision and probationary sentences, large racial disproportionalities remain in Philadelphia's court system. Those of you who want more information about this, just go to phillyda.org. That's phillyda.org, and you'll be able to read for yourself this 66-page report. And in my article in the Tribune, I also talk about something called the Cure Report. That's a report that was done back in 2019 that looked at the court system in Philadelphia and concluded that Philadelphia's court system is immersed in racial tension, that among some white judges and white court staff, there is a, quote, troubling pattern of racial resentment. And finally, some judges do not believe that institutional structural racism even exists. Well, Larry Krasner, District Attorney Larry Krasner's powerful report not only shows that it exists, but proves it numerically. That's topic number 2. And in my final 24, 25 minutes, I'm going to talk about my third topic. It's timely and untimely. It's timely because it refers to an annual event, so it's coming around again. It's untimely because it talks about July 4th, and we just passed July 4th about 3 days ago. But because my show is broadcasted initially the first Friday of each month, that first Friday is today, July 7th. So I still want to talk about it. In the Philadelphia Tribune, wrote an article entitled 10 Reasons Why Blacks Should Never Celebrate July 4th. Just briefly, in my last 5 minutes, I'm going to highlight that. Number 1, America hated us, Black people, even before July 4th, 1776. They began hating us on August 25, 1619, with the birth of American British colonial slavery. There's a lot more I want to talk about. We don't have time. But number 1, we should not celebrate July 4th because America hated us on July 4th, 1776, proven by the fact that they enslaved us. But it didn't just begin there. You can say it began well before then. On August 25, 1619, in the Virginia colony, as a result of British colonial enslavement, number 1. Number 2, on July 4, 1776, when the edited version of the Declaration of Independence was formally adopted by the Continental Congress, there were 56 white male property owners who signed that document. July 4, 1776, Philadelphia, 56 white male property owners. 41 of those 56 enslaved my ancestors. And I'm supposed to celebrate that? No, that's number 2. Number 3, of those 56 white male property owners and enslavers, the person who is given credit for drafting the Constitution, Thomas Jefferson, on the date of July 4, 1776, enslaved 175 Black men, women, and children. And that number increased to 267 by 1822. That's reason number 3. Reason number 4. In 1776, slavery was legal in all 13 colonies. In fact, census records from about that time showed that there were 40,000 enslaved Black folks in Pennsylvania. And of that 40,000, I should say in this region, which included New Jersey and Maryland, there were about 40,000 Blacks enslaved, 40,000 in the region. Of that 40,000, about 7,000 were in Pennsylvania. And of that 7,000, nearly 600 were right here in Philadelphia. That's why Blacks should not celebrate July 4th. That's reason number 4. Reason number 5. Despite the claim in the Constitution, I should say in the Declaration of Independence, despite the claim in the Declaration of Independence that, quote, all men are created equal, there were more than 500,000 enslaved persons in the 13 colonies from 1776 to 1800. So even though that document signed by an enslaver, Thomas Jefferson, says all men are created equal, at the time he wrote that, there were about 500,000 enslaved Black persons in the 13 colonies from 1776 to 1800. That's reason number 5. Reason number 6. After the Continental Congress declared independence and then declared war, General George Washington initially said, Black people, y'all not thorough enough. We can't have y'all as soldiers. Then when the British began to kick the 13 colonies' butts, George Washington rethought his position and said, those Black people, maybe I will use them as soldiers. As a result, 5,000 Black men volunteered and helped the 13 colonies, the new American government, win the Revolutionary War against Britain in 1783. You might think it's a happy ending. No, because you know what happened after that? Many of those 5,000, those who didn't die in combat, those who helped lead America to victory and succeeded and survived, guess what happened to many of them? They were re-enslaved. Think about that. WTF, you help America win, and then America re-enslaves you. That's the truth about American history. Number 7, I spoke about George Washington. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going into more detail, but just Google attack, ATAC, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition. We're the group that exposed to the public the fact that George Washington enslaved Black people right here in Philadelphia at America's first White House. And our great producer, Roland, has it up on the screen. It gives you the history of what George Washington did in enslaving Black people. I got 2 minutes left. Number 8, check out the U.S. Constitution. There's the 3/5 clause. There's the continuation of the importation of slavery. There's the runaway return clause. So that legal document, the Constitution, which went into effect in 1788 and was the result of the Revolutionary War in 1776, that same Constitution promoted slavery. That's why we should celebrate July 4th. Number 9, there were 12 presidents who enslaved Black people, anywhere from enslaving 1 to enslaving 316. That's why Black folks shouldn't celebrate July 4th. And reason number 10, Black people during the time of the Revolutionary War, before and after, helped build the important symbols in America. Let me just read this. Following the Declaration of Independence in 1776 and the Revolutionary War victory in 1783, some of America's greatest facilities/symbols were built, but not by free white men. Instead, they were built by enslaved Black men. They include, among others, the White House in 1792 and the U.S. Capitol in 1793. There's much more I want to share with you, and here's how you can get more information about all these topics I shared. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Michael Cord. That's MichaelCoard. That's on Twitter and Instagram. You can also check out my radio show. It's called The Radio Courtroom, WURD 96.1 FM. WURD 96.1 FM every Saturday from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. I thank you all for tuning in. Please be safe, and thank you very much.